Hey guys, this is Jay Calder with Jay Unboxing here, giving you a personal prediction for Jake Paul versus Tommy Fury. And of course, this is just my take. Your predictions can be left down in the comments section below. It's kind of an interesting fight again. It's one of those weird ones where you have some fighters you probably didn't expect to be fighting 2, 3 years ago. A YouTube personality versus the brother of the world heavyweight champion. You just don't expect this to necessarily happen, but here we are. So I'd love to hear your thoughts and your picks, all that good stuff down in the comments section below. And a little bit of fight info here. This is going to be Jake Paul taking on Tommy Fury. Let me try to butcher this here. This will be at the DIRIYAH Arena in Diriyah, Saudi Arabia. Apologies to everyone from there. I'm sure I completely ruined that. This will be on BT Sport pay-per-view in the United Kingdom and on ESPN pay-per-view in the United States. Of course, in the sort of cruiserweight division, kind of light cruiserweight, really at 185-pound catch weight. And of course, obviously, no titles on the line. Come on. This is a fight that I really don't know why I'm doing, because based on recent history when trying to get these two in the ring to face off against one another, it hasn't happened. However, this one seems like it might have stuck. Finally, they just had to fly halfway across the world to get it done, but it does look as though it finally will take place. Of course, they were supposed to meet 2 separate times, but then injuries to Tommy Fury, visa issues for Tommy Fury, you just couldn't seem to get the fight made, but ultimately, knock on wood of course, it does appear as though this fight will finally be happening. It's interesting again because it's the first time that you have Jake Paul taking on, a real boxer, technically speaking. That's going to be interesting from his perspective, but also on the flip side of that, this is really the first time Tommy Fury has faced anyone in his relatively short career where that person was even kind of sort of expected to win. He's really not tested himself really all that much. Having said that, to be truthful, as much as this is a quote-unquote pay-per-view fight, the fact of the matter is, this is when you start testing fighters, when they're still prospects, and make no mistake about it, based upon the amount of fights they have and experience they have, that's the port of their career where they're at right now. They are still prospect. And this is what's going to ultimately determine which of these two really has much of a shot, in my personal opinion. So, we're going to see Jake Paul continue to keep rolling here, or will Tommy Fury be the one that's going to end up being undefeated on the end of the night? Let's break this one down and try to find out. Now, for Jake Paul to win, let's make no mistake about it, it's going to be very simple. Set up the right hand. That's what you're kind of always looking to do when you're Jake Paul. It's your money shots, the best punch you have in the locker, so to speak. It's naturally what you're going to want to get going. However, this is the first time it's going to need to be a bit more nuanced for Paul, of course. This is the first time you're facing a fighter that is trained, that really has been a fighter for a reasonable period of time. You're not going to just be able to throw it out there and hope for the best. You'll need to set it up a bit more. That, of course, means you're going to want to feint a little bit, jab if you can. You're going to want to paw with that shot and vary the speed and power on it as well. This will kind of give him a harder time adapting to it, setting up for it defensively, and really being able to know what to expect. The more you can do that, the better chance you have of not only landing the shot, but getting the effect out of it that you want to, by kind of, again, varying it up a bit more, adding a few more wrinkles to it. Nothing crazy. Again, you're still a relatively novice fighter in certain respects, so this is not going to be something I'm expecting you to put together perfectly, but the more you can set it up, the better, and I think that's what you'll need to do to be successful with it. I would also say don't rush your work. You don't necessarily rush your work in the sense that you're going for broke every single time. I don't really see you doing that, but you have had some stamina issues in the past. That's what you're going to need to look to avoid. You're going to not want to load up on your shots so much. You're going to want to make sure they're coming out more freely, and that when they do finally possess that power, you're keeping it in short bursts so that this way you can still preserve a bit more in the tanks. Once and or if you start landing with a bit more regularity, then it's a bit different. Then you can start putting more of your shots together, putting a bit more power, a little more oomph behind the shots. Again, but that's in the second half of this fight, so to speak, which is supposed to be around the 8-round mark. So you get to the 3rd, 4th round, you still have that reserves in the back pocket, of course, then you start to use it, but certainly don't rush into it by throwing too much, by making this a personal fight seem far more personal in the ring. Keep that out of it. Instead, be more measured, more composed, then build into the fight as it progresses. And finally, make him feel the weight. If you're Jake here, you've fought above 175 pounds, I believe, pretty much every fight of your career. On the other hand, you have Tommy Fury here, who is a light heavyweight. He's going to have to pack on 10 pounds, and in his case, it's going to be, relatively speaking, muscle, because he is a more muscly fighter. That's going to make him feel stiffer, potentially slower. It's going to perhaps tire him a bit quicker. You're going to want to make him feel that by, when you're on the inside, leaning on him a bit more, putting more weight behind your shots again in those spots in the beginning and then ultimately more often in the fight. But you have to make him feel that weight difference. Otherwise, you lose that advantage and there's no reason to give it up. The more you can lean on him, tire him, push him around, back him up a bit, he's going to have far less control over how much that weight matters in the fight. Obviously, that means you'll have much more, and you can take advantage of it by setting up those right hands more, pushing them back, and then again, building into the fight as it progresses. Now, switching over to Fury. For Fury to win, I think you want to work your speed. Don't load up. You want to have faster hands here, quite honestly. You're technically the smaller, lighter fighter. You have a bit more reach. You should be trying to get there first, not worrying so much about whether or not you're landing that knockout blow. You have a tendency at time to kind of throw with your arms a bit more than with your actual body and turning into it a lot more. If you just focus on speed and trying to get those shots in and score, I think this will kind of play into the fact that, while, again, you do arm punch a bit more, at least this is getting you some points and some rounds. If you play into Paul's hands of trying to load up and see who can land that big bomb first, you might be there. You might be the guy that ends up hitting that jackpot, but you also might get tagged by perhaps a naturally bigger, heavier guy, and that's just not what you're looking to do. So don't load up. Don't look for that singular shot. Work your speed, score some points. If you start busting them up, then of course you can press a bit more. But until then, be patient and don't load up so much. Work more on speed. I would also say throw in some feints. Because he hasn't faced any boxers, one of the things that I don't see a lot of fighters doing against Paul is just simple things like feints. Getting him to kind of fall into a trap that you can then set and then land a shot in the sort of midst of him coming in thinking that you're trying to commit. It's a very simple tactic, but it's one that if you've been training and fighting around fighters for a long period of time, you pick up pretty easily. It's not something that's going to have to reinvent the wheel in your training camp. It's just a good enough tactic that you can probably draw him into things, especially as he tires later in the fight, that will allow for you to then score with some bigger blows because he's walking into the shots. So I think if you're Tommy Fury, that's certainly something you're going to want to look to do on the night. And I would also say attack the body. This is going to be important. Again, he's a bigger guy, heavier. He's had some stamina issues. And when you get inside, again, you're going to need to look to score some of those bigger shots to try and tire him, get him out of there, not leaning on you. Attacking the body is a good way to do that. It will especially highlight his potential stamina issues if they do happen to show up on the night. But you can't just bank on them showing up. You have to make them. And that happens by attacking the body. Simple hooks, even a couple of just straight on shots, shoe shining even at times. But as long as you're tagging him enough in ways that he's not used to in a real live fight, the better if you're Tommy Fury. Now, in terms of my pick here, I don't know, man. I mean, I just can't seem to call these Jake Paul fights correctly, whether it's by the exact method or just the winner. It's probably going to get this one wrong too. But in any event, I'm picking the slight favorite in Jake Paul. More on the odds in a bit. The two reasons are pretty simple. It's his size and his power. Doesn't mean he stops him, but I think he has enough power and enough skill to set it up enough times to keep Fury honest. I think it starts scrappy. Both might even be wobbled or hurt or pushed around a bit, but I think it settles down after a few frames. There, the straight shots of Paul that actually have a bit more power behind them will force Fury back and start to make a bit of the difference. Fury arm punches a bit too often for my liking, and that is where Paul will make up any of that sort of distance that he might fall behind, maybe in terms of just overall experience. The right hand will score. Push Fury back more as the rounds progress, and carrying that extra weight for Fury will also add up, as Paul will do enough to earn more of the rounds more comfortably towards the end of the fight than maybe some are even expecting. Winner, Jake Paul via solid unanimous decision. Now, in terms of the betting odds here, Paul is a slight favorite, as mentioned, coming in at a -175, with Fury coming in at a +140. To be honest here, again, plenty of people hate Paul, plenty of people think Fury is going to be the man to finally knock him off. This is pretty decent line if you're a Fury supporter. +140 is not bad at all. You can get a pretty decent mid-sized bet here. Like your chances in terms of return, quite honestly, because again, he is the first real boxer, at least in most people's minds, that Paul is facing. So if you like those odds, certainly pick those up. To be honest, that line with Paul at a -175 is not particularly interesting to me. I think it's too little value there for a fight that I'm just not that confident in. If you happen to really think Fury is just not the man to do it, of course, you can jump on that with a small bet for the most part, just not for me. In terms of the over-under, it's set at a 6.5 with -190 for the over and the under coming in at a +135. Now that seems like a pretty low over-under, but that's because, again, it is an 8-round fight, so you have to keep that in mind. In terms of the line being set, I think it's decent. Of course, means that there's likely a decision, which I happen to agree with. Either guy that wins probably does do it over the distance. So even though you're getting like 2-1 odds of the over, I'm not terribly unfond of that, so to speak. I might even lay a small bet on that, just getting that 50% return, because I do think it really does go the distance. Having said that, again, if you do think someone gets a shock knockout earlier in the frames, not a terrible return. Again, I wouldn't put too much on either side here because this is such an unknown fight. You just can't really tell. But in any event, those are your odds. And my prediction record as of this recording is 3-3 with 3 exact. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Would love to hear your thoughts on this one. Of course, your bets, predictions, all that good stuff. Again, especially about this one, it's always an interesting one when you have these kind of fights involved. But please be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and follow me on Twitter at jcalderon_JOB. You can email me at junboxing@gmail.com. Would love to hear from you there. Also, be sure to check out junboxing.com for schedule, results, betting odds, rankings, news, previews, all that good stuff. And as always, until next time.